Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us.
Well, welcome back to Focus Today. Steve Johnson with you, along with a guy who's on theDove TV. You'll see him every night at just about 9 o'clock if we air it correctly. It is Wretched TV. It is a very wretched show, and he wouldn't have it any other way. It's Todd Friel. Hey, how are you doing?
If you air it correctly, is it like pushing the wrong button?
You know, we don't do that around here, but there's always that possibility that some intern will come in. See, there's the I think you can relate to that. Merry Christmas. How are you doing?
Remember the radio and TV stations of yesteryear? You would walk into a room and there'd be reels and tapes and cassettes and these big, huge. Now, one computer basically runs the whole shebang. It's amazing.
I know, and one of the problems is when it works well, it works great, but when it goes down, it's everything.
The prince and the power of the airwaves. That's the problem.
Sounds like another documentary in the making right there.
Sure.
Todd Friel, you seem to be doing well today. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Wow.
For you.
The first time I ever got a one-word answer. That is good. I appreciate that. Wretched TV. Wretched TV weeknights at 9 p.m. Want to talk, I want to talk to you about the pulse of what you are seeing, because I know you interact with a lot of people. I've seen your shows where you're out on the streets kind of doing the interviews with the common man on the street, not like David Letterman or Jay Leno, but more talking about those issues that kind of have meaning and value. I just saw this from the Associated Press, and it's happening just south of where we are in Berkeley. Authorities there arresting at least 19 people as protesters angered by the killings of unarmed black men by white officers rallied for a fourth night. Of course, this is through the Associated Press. This has been ongoing now, for quite some time. 5 adults, 1 juvenile. What else can I tell you here? California Highway Patrol apprehending an additional 13. Hundreds of demonstrators walking through the streets of Berkeley. Mayor Tom Bates canceled a scheduled city council meeting because there were threats to disrupt that. Now, that's something when the mayor of Berkeley has a problem because of protesters, they're so liberal in their legislature and city anyway, that when that's a threat, that's pretty amazing. And I think we've all seen this thing. We have a situation where Trayvon Martin has been tied in, his unfortunate death, as well as Eric Garner, Michael Brown, all of those now kind of coalescing, although they were totally separate incidents, but they're coalescing into something that seems to be a uniform movement. And I just want to ask first just a very broad question to you. As what we're seeing here, do you think this is an extended movement, or is this a reaction to some relatively recent events?
Please don't take anything that we're about to discuss with just a snapshot or just hearing one of these sentences without a bigger context.
Okay.
But let me just suggest from the get-go, this whole conversation that we are having in our country, I think everybody's happy to have it. It is a mess. It is. I watch the news networks, and especially Fox, because I'm an evangelical Christian. So I watch the talk shows, and I'm watching the dialogues, and everybody seems to be talking past one another. And I think part of the problem, Steve, I could be wrong, but my analysis is we are not being precise with our language. We are not being specific with details. I watch Geraldo and Bill O'Reilly, and they're yelling at each other. And I don't think they're all that far off, but they're just not being precise with language. And I think that's causing a great deal of chaos and anger and frustration bubbling over into law breaking. So my encouragement for Christians as we engage on this issue is don't just listen to what somebody says or accuses, qualify, ask them what they mean. What are they talking about? An example, if I could. Geraldo Rivera was stating that moms in urban neighborhoods are more afraid of the police than they are of gangbangers. Now, and Bill O'Reilly, oh, that's ridiculous. Moms aren't, they're afraid of the drug dealers, that their kids are going to get caught, not the police. And they could not see eye to eye. And I thought, would somebody please qualify this issue? Maybe it's that moms are afraid that their sons will find themselves in a bad situation and have to be confronted by the police or arrested by the police or dealt with by the police. And it could end up that they end up in jail or they could end up getting hurt, whatever the situation is. I think that's what Geraldo was trying to say, but he wasn't saying it because he wasn't being precise. And I think that's just one example of how precision in language would guide us through a lot of this mess.
Well, you know, I think you are correct on that, because I haven't really seen a focused discussion of what the issue might be. And I don't even know if there is one issue, to tell you the truth. But let me ask you this. With that vagueness that's going on right now, normally in protests, you get a slogan, you're chanting it, and you're not willing to dialogue. You just want to make your point. I would ask, is there even room to have this dialogue right now, or is everything so tense that nobody can really talk in a rational way, which is what I think you're saying?
It's exceedingly tense, this issue, for whatever reason. And I think this is something else that we Christians need to remember. Whatever your color happens to be, racism is a part, I think, of the human DNA because of the fall. It's not a skin problem, it's a sin problem, because we're all in Adam unless we've been put into Christ. But the residue of the fall, we all have a propensity to see somebody of a different skin color and think bad thoughts or think superior thoughts. And I think that goes for everybody, black, white, yellow, brown, whatever, that because of the fall, we all have to battle those tendencies. Now, knowing that, I agree with you. My wife has been, every time we have the news on, she gets almost apoplectic. And she doesn't mean it in an angry way. She just wants some clarity. What is the issue? I think there are three, Steve.
Oh, really? Okay.
That people are concerned about profiling. They seem to be concerned about that young black men are being killed at an inappropriate rate by police officers, mostly because they're unarmed, as if it is just a hard racial profiling with no other considerations. And third, the grand jury system seems to be the third column that they want to have addressed. My plea for the folks who are upset about any of these issues is everybody's listening. We're all willing to talk. Just clarify your message.
Okay. Well, you know, that clarification, I think, got a little bit muddled, where people are looking at the president and what he thinks and what he's going to say. And I don't have his direct quotes, but I remember that just a couple days ago he said, we really haven't made much progress of racism in the United States. And I'm thinking, that perspective just historically is wrong. It may not have been as much, and I think we'd all agree with that, as what he would like. But I'm looking back at this saying, if Lincoln were sitting in the room with him, I think that he might have a few things to say about what racism was like back in his day. So do you not to bash Obama, but do you think he's just adding to this confusion with those kinds of comments?
Why don't you want to bash him? I'm sorry. Okay.
Because Todd, I want to talk about the actual issue, like you said.
I think one of the lessons that we're seeing from Ferguson is a real lack of leadership, especially biblical leadership, without the Bible bringing context to understanding what the issue is. And by the way, the biblical solution, which we see in Galatians 3, the thing that erases racism, is the gospel. When people move from being in Adam to in Christ, that takes care of sexism, it takes care of racism, it takes care of xenophobia, it takes care of everything. But when we see leaders that don't have a clear vision for how things are supposed to be rightly ordered, wow, I'm in Atlanta, and I saw a fellow who was a leader for the black community, and he said, we need to teach our young men to learn how to respond to the police. And I thought, well, that's a good lesson for all of us to learn. But he continued talking, and he said, so that they can learn to defend themselves so they don't get killed. Wow. Every police officer who wakes up to do good every single morning, that had to be like a dagger to the heart. It undermined authority, which is what makes this such a big issue, Steve. when people rebel against authority, they're actually rebelling against God, because God is the one who has put these institutions of authority into place. So when people rebel against police or government, it actually goes higher up the ladder to a rebellion against God. So these are very big, serious sin issues. We're seeing, though, a lack of leadership, clarity, vision, bringing parties together to say, let's be specific, precise, and work through a good, godly conclusion.
And we're far away from that point, aren't we?
Oh, it's been heartbreaking to watch. Look, it's been a struggle. We see that historically for racial issues, but so much progress has been made, and it just seems, look, now, here's a possibility, Steve. We have to admit this. We need to recognize if there are some people who can't quite see the issue clearly, in our opinion, because of their skin color, I need to be willing to say, maybe I'm not seeing it clearly because of my skin color. That is a gracious Christian perspective. So what do we need? I think what we need are some facts. We need some specifics. How many unarmed black men are getting killed by police every year? Well, the actual number is 123 in 2012. So is that an epidemic? Now, having said that, you go, only 123 and there's 46 million black people, that's nothing. Well, we got to be careful with that. It's still 123 young black men dead. And that's a tragedy, regardless of whether they were innocent or guilty. And if I could, Steve, that's another lesson. As we talk about these issues and we think that we're bringing the right solution, even if we're right, if we don't recognize that there is a people group that is struggling more than others, and we don't speak about it with a heart of compassion and a desire to indeed see justice rightly carried out and people to rise and flourish, we can be as right as rain, but still sound like jerks and not end up helping anybody.
Good point, good point. We're talking with Todd Friel. He's the host of Wretched TV. You can see on theDove weeknights at 9 p.m. We're going to continue our discussion, and I'm going to move into the area of whether this has anything to do with civil rights, which we've been seeing. Maybe it does. Maybe you've got some thoughts on that. We'll be talking to Todd more on that issue coming up in about 2 minutes right here on Focus Today. Welcome back to Focus Today. Our guest, Todd Friel. He's the host of Wretched TV, seen on theDove at 9 p.m. Monday through Friday and repeated at multiple times. So you can check out. There's even an early morning showing for insomniacs. Did you know you have a large audience of that, Todd? I don't know if they can take it. You know, instead of a cup of coffee, they have Wretched TV.
Yeah, you know, I can't recall the proverb, but you know, nobody likes the chirping bird in the morning. You know, Mr. Hey, good morning. How are you, everybody? Why in the world would you put me on in the morning? I must be the most annoying way for people to start their day.
Well, what we decide we have, we're thinking of having the Evelyn Wood lip reading course so that they can turn the volume down and just read what your lips are, or create whatever they want you to have said. So that might work.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Well, we're thinking of inventing it. We're looking for some sort of fundraising effort.
Get the trademark on that.
It's got to happen. We don't even know who Evelyn Wood was. Anyway, Todd with us, talking about some of the trends that are going on that we're seeing throughout the United States, really. It's not just in one specific area. Protests happening in Berkeley as well as Ferguson, Missouri, really across the United States. So I want to continue with that. You know, this has been linked as being some sort of a civil rights kind of a movement, not unlike what had happened in the 50s and the 60s. But I don't see the tie-in to this nearly as unified as what that was with, say, Martin Luther King and some of the others who were actually the walkers in Alabama who made the difference back then. I'm almost seeing that this is an opportunity for anarchists and socialists and so all sorts of people to kind of glam on this for other motivations. But do you see this? Is this really a civil rights issue that's going on now as a result of some of these unfortunate deaths that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of important points in that statement, which I think a Christian needs to consider before joining whatever this movement is. There was an article, I want to say it was the New York Times, that was written about a seminary vice president who said Jesus would actually be here protesting. So I thought, all right, is that true? Would Jesus join the protests? Because if he would, then maybe I should, and if he wouldn't, then I shouldn't. And so I tried to carefully think this through, because a lot of times people like to use Jesus to endorse their cause. So would Jesus join Al Sharpton and people who are out in the streets and in some instances burning down buildings, at the very least stopping traffic? And I would gently suggest, no, he wouldn't. And here are some reasons why. Number one, right now, at least right now, the protests are, there's too much law breaking going on. And I don't think that Jesus or Christians would or should align themselves with law breaking, even if it's just shutting down traffic. That's against the law, and there are people trying to get to their jobs, and that's not loving my neighbor. So for that reason, until there's a leader who organizes them in a peaceful, organized way, I would say we better be slow to join what looks like it is quite, some of these activities have been just downright terroristic. What happened in Ferguson was terrorism, and a Christian should be slow to align him or herself with that. I think a second reason is the message, as we were discussing. I don't know what the demands or the requests or the laments are yet. They have not been made clear, so I don't want to attach my Christian testimony with what is unclear and could be perceived as an endorsement of something that is bad. I think the third consideration is, why did Jesus come to this earth? Did he ever align himself with movements or protests? I don't see that. In fact, to the contrary, Luke 13 or 18, when Jesus was confronted and said, Pontius Pilate has been killing people as they were sacrificing in the temple. What's the message there? And Jesus' response was not social, it was theological. He said, the message is repent unless you likewise perish. Jesus didn't come to be a part of the Zealot movement or the Pharisees. He came to save sinners. And that's our Christian message. Now, that doesn't mean we don't care about unborn humans. It doesn't mean we don't care about different people and their needs and injustices. But our message in these situations is the gospel, and not what appears to be so far an angry anarchy. So I don't, unless those things get righted, I think at this point we Christians can speak into the situation, but until some of those criteria are met, I'm not sure we should be joining those movements.
You know, I think a couple years ago, what you brought to mind, it wasn't a civil rights issue, but I think of the Occupy movement, where people were saying, what is really the agenda? And once again, I don't know that one ever really came up, other than to disrupt whatever it was people wanted to disrupt, and it was random at that point. So,
but see, that's not loving my neighbor. Look,
yeah.
They might have had a cause. I don't think they did, but that's not, loving my neighbor is not going into a store and shutting down their commerce. That's a sin. And you're right about the message. Occupy Wall Street. I don't know exactly what they wanted, at least articulated. Now, the good news is, Steve, we Christians could bring an articulate message and solution to the problem. So in all of this, to me, it just screams, people need the gospel.
Yeah, I agree. Well, along those lines, then, let me ask you this. Here you have a couple white guys who are talking about this. It seems as if our race, our color of our skin, precludes us from having a discussion in this. Do you feel that is an issue? I mean, you mentioned Fox News earlier, and I'll be blunt. They look for a black conservative who can articulate what they would otherwise say. Right. Do you think people other than those of color are being shut down in this discussion, or not?
Well, let's remember, people have skin color, arguments do not. So I can talk about an issue. I don't need to have axe murdered somebody to talk about an axe murderer. I don't need to be a woman to talk about abortion. Arguments do not have genders. Arguments do not have skin colors. Now, having said that, presuppositions, we need to, this is something Christians need to remember as we go about interpreting Scripture. I bring stuff to the table. I watched a lot of Gilligan's Island. I was raised in a home in the suburbs as opposed to the city, a white home. And I was raised listening to Duran Duran. All of these things are in here, and I bring them to every single situation, including interpreting Scripture. My goal, my job as a Christian, is to set aside those types of pre-understandings and my history. I want to set it aside, and I want to look at the situation as objectively as I can, recognizing I'm still on this side of the veil and fallen. I want to set my skin color aside, and I want to bring facts, and I want to bring the Bible to bear, and not my preferences or my presuppositions.
Okay. You know, we're going to be coming up to a time where all sorts of relatives and friends are going to be meeting together who maybe only see each other once a year at Christmas time. And I know some families will have a diverse mindset within their family, from the left to the right to, you know, age and as you said, all the stuff you come with. So here's what I'm going to put you in the hot seat right now. For Todd Friel not to have all sorts of problems within a family reunion at Christmas, because these subjects could very well come up. What are the suggestions that you have if a person has a point of view but need to express it effectively? What would you suggest needs to be done? And we can really then expand that out to no matter where we are, but I'm thinking Christmas could be a hotbed.
Yeah, you know, again, just because it's in the Old Testament, we are still the do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with our God people. So we're not opposed to mercy and justice. We're the only ones who can rightly define what it is and actually lay hold of the concept and the claim. So we speak into the life issue, we speak into the marriage issue, we speak into the poverty issue, we can speak into the racial issues. But I would ask at Christmas time, if this is your once-a-year opportunity with some folks who potentially aren't saved, do you ultimately want them to be persuaded that Michael Brown was actually the bad guy in the situation? Or do you want them to hear that Jesus Christ came to this earth, took on human form to keep all of the laws that we've broken, to receive the wrath of God on our behalf so that sinners could be forgiven and seen as righteous? Do we want them to hear that, or do we want to tussle over an issue that most likely you will never get any sort of consensus at the Christmas table?
All right, Todd, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for being with us. We're going to talk to you more. Thanks for joining us here on Focus today.
Great question, though.